All right, let's just jump right in. Sometimes in politics, you come across a puzzle where the pieces, they just don't seem to fit at all. You've got two groups that on paper should be complete opposites, maybe even bitter rivals, but then a picture pops up, or you hear about a quiet meeting, and you just have to ask yourself, what is really going on here?
And that's pretty much the core question we're tackling today. We're looking at this really strange meeting between India's ruling Hindu nationalist party, the BJP, their ideological mentors, the RSS, and, get this, the Communist Party of China. Publicly, they couldn't be more different, but behind closed doors, well, that's a different story. So let's unpack what our source material has to say about it.
Okay, first up, the puzzling handshake. We're starting with a meeting that honestly seems to defy all logic.
So let's take a look at who was actually there. A delegation from China's Communist Party shows up, and they don't just meet with the usual government folks. Nope. They're welcomed right into the BJP's central office. And they even sit down with a very senior leader from the RSS, a guy named Dattatreya Hosabale. And this is the key thing to get. This wasn't just, regular diplomacy. This was party to party, organization to organization.
And this is where the contradiction just smacks you in the face. I mean, the source material is very clear on this. For decades, the RSS has literally called communists enemies. BJP spokespeople have thrown around some really harsh words for Chinese leaders. And yet, here they are, shaking hands, smiling for the cameras, having these formal meetings. So what gives? Is this a brand new thing, a sudden change of heart, or is there something else going on?
All right, Section 2, a decades-long connection. Because, as it turns out, this is not new at all. According to our sources, that handshake we just saw, it wasn't some random one-off thing. It was just the tip of the iceberg, the most visible part of a relationship that's been quietly built up for years.
And that's exactly the question the journalists in our source material started asking. And you know what happened when they started digging? They found this really clear, consistent pattern of meetings and visits, going way back, long before the BJP was even in power nationally.
Just look at this timeline for a second. The source points out that back when Narendra Modi was chief minister of Gujarat, he actually visited China more than any other country. Think about that. Even back in 2011, when the BJP was the opposition party, their president at the time, Nitin Gadkari, took a whole delegation over there. The source literally says there were multiple visits. So again, this isn't just standard diplomacy. This is something else entirely, a sustained party-to-party thing.
Okay, Section 3, the one-party blueprint. And this, right here, is the million-dollar question. Why? Why on earth would a right-wing Hindu nationalist party be so fascinated with a communist state? Well, the source material offers up a theory, and it's a pretty startling one.
So, what could they possibly want to learn from an officially atheist communist state? According to this analysis, it's not really about economics, it's not about culture, it's about one thing: power. And more specifically, it's about a very particular model for how you get power and how you keep it.
And this is the model that's at the absolute heart of the source's theory. Think about it. The Communist Party of China has been in charge, without a break, for more than 70 years. They don't have to worry about elections like a democracy does. They don't get challenged by independent courts or a noisy parliament. They just rule.
So here's the bombshell claim from the source. Those BJP and RSS delegations, they weren't flying to China to talk about trade deals. They were going there as students to study the machinery of a one-party state. How do you run a country without being questioned? How do you make sure your power is permanent, that it lasts for generations? The alleged goal, according to the source, was to learn how to implement that exact Chinese model right there in India. And now for Section 4, rhetoric versus reality. Because this is where things get really complicated. While all this quiet admiration for the Chinese model was supposedly happening behind the scenes, the public story and the cold, hard reality on the ground was something else entirely. It was hostile.
For the folks back home, the message was totally different. It was all about nationalism, boycotting Chinese goods. The source gives this perfect example, a quote from a Diwali speech, telling people not to buy small-eyed Ganesha idols made in China. It's a call to action, wrapped up in national pride, and, yeah, even some pretty crude stereotypes.
And look, this wasn't just talk. While these friendly party-to-party visits were going on, China was getting really aggressive on India's borders. We're talking building new settlements in Ladakh, putting up a massive dam on a river that India depends on, and even renaming places in the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, which they started calling South Tibet. All this tension just kept simmering and simmering until it finally exploded in the Galwan Valley. It led to this incredibly brutal clash, the most serious fight between the two countries in decades.
21. That was the human cost for India.
21 Indian soldiers lost their lives, and the source really hammers this point home. Not a single shot was fired. This was brutal, medieval, hand-to-hand combat in the freezing high altitude, a reality that is just worlds away from those quiet, friendly meetings in party offices, right?
And as if that wasn't bad enough, the source brings up this absolutely damning allegation from a retired, very senior Indian general. He claims that in other situations, the Indian army was basically fighting a war on two fronts. Why? Because China was supposedly feeding live intelligence and providing something like 80% of all weapons to India's biggest rival, Pakistan.
Okay, so that brings us to our final section, two models of power. So how do you square this circle? How do you have this alleged private admiration for China's political system on one side and this bloody, real-world conflict on the other? Well, our source concludes that it's actually not a contradiction. It's all part of a larger alleged vision for India's future, a vision that's inspired by two very different playbooks from around the world.
So according to the source, these are the two models they're supposedly looking at. Model 1 is China. That's the blueprint for how to rule, how to get uninterrupted one-party political control. But then there's Model 2, Israel. And the source alleges that this provides a template for what they call a Zionist racist state. Now, those are the source's very provocative words, not mine. But the argument is that this model shows how to create a state that legally prioritizes one specific religious and ethnic group over everyone else.
And so, all of this leaves us with one last big question. When a political party seems to have two completely different faces, one that it shows to the public, full of conflict and nationalism, and another hidden one that's quietly studying the playbook of its so-called adversary, which face is the real one? The one you see on the campaign trail, or the one that's revealed behind closed doors? It's a question that really gets to the heart of this entire, very puzzling and very unexpected partnership.